Alright, for this video here, next we're going to start on wiring up our ESCs and our power connector to our main board here. This will be your lower board of the quadcopter with this side facing up. Suppose you could build it like that and run your ESC wires up underneath, but I don't think that would be the preferred method. So ours will be mounted facing up. You're going to need 4 ESCs. Now I'd mentioned last time on my last video there that these were the brand of these ESCs. They are just generic ESCs, and I've done more research, and they are Simon K, as in the individual who designed the firmware. His name is Simon K. So 30 amp ESCs with Simon K firmware by Hobby Powered. Now if you notice, there's a little bit of tape on each one of these. The back I've actually cut the shrink wrap off, and I have re-flashed each one of these with his most up-to-date firmware. They all did come loaded with the, if you get into flashing them, they did come with the bootloader, so you could flash them through the signal wire. However, every single one of them I tried to do that method. It failed partway through, corrupting the firmware on the ESC, and the only way to recover it was to go through the backside of the ESC. Luckily on this particular one, there were pads to actually make the connections to directly talk to the AT-Mega 8 microcontroller that's on the ESCs. So went through, reprogrammed each one of those. The biggest issue I found with them is that they, if you look on Amazon, exact same ones listed there say they have an external oscillator. I can tell you these do not, because when I flashed a bootloader that called for that changed the fuses and called for an external oscillator, it bricked one of them, and I actually had to rig up an external oscillator in order to recover the chip. Long story short, they are Simon K firmware, as far as I could tell, without an external oscillator. So if you decide to flash them, do your research and know what you're getting into, because you may find yourself in a world of hurt. Luckily I was able to build that oscillator using an Arduino board and recover the ESC. As far as programming through the signal wire, I don't recommend it. Like I said, every one of them got corrupted doing that, and I ended up having to cut them all open. I was reprogramming the fuses anyways, so that was the only way to do that. So if you don't want to get into your ESCs, leave them like they are. They should work fine for your application. Other things you're going to need, so we got the 2 little lengths of wire they gave us and a Dean's connector. I'm going to use the Dean's connector as my preferred connection method. Not sure why. First batteries I ordered came with Dean's. First helicopter I built had Dean's. I do have XT60 connectors, but I just always like to stick with the Dean's. So that's the parts we're going to assemble today. Other things you're going to need is a good thing of flux, rosin core, soldering flux. That's almost a must, if you ask me. I use it everywhere. I actually would rather not even have solder with a rosin core, because I just use the flux in the container. So flux, preferably, most people use rosin core. Just stay away from acid core stuff, and then you can get just plain soldering wire that does not have flux in it at all, which is fine. And a soldering iron. Yes, my soldering iron is a little rough, but it should work fine for this application. Oh, let's see here. Alright, so first thing I always like to do, first thing I have to do, you have to strip each one of these wires, strip both ends, that way we can go ahead and do our power connector. I got a pair of scissors here. A good sharp pair of scissors will work just fine. I always end up doing that because I can never find my wire connectors. Just be careful. The more wires you clip off of here, when you do strip the coating off of there, reduces the amperes the wire can carry. But if you're careful, you should be able to strip the coating on the wire without too many issues. So there we are. Before I put that in the Dean's connector, I will go over here and get my handy dandy shrink tubing out. Alright, so a little bit of soldering basics. So we'll start off with these wires. Like I said, have your flux. This just makes life so much easier. What I do with bare wires like this, I just go ahead and dip each end in the flux. That just kind of prepares the wire for the solder. Take your handy dandy soldering iron. Now my soldering iron is actually, it's only at 25 watts. So I may actually have trouble soldering on these larger pads, but we should be able to accomplish the job. So a little higher wattage soldering iron would be nice. So I preload my soldering iron. I always do that. My tips actually get kind of melted down after a while because I always do it. But now I got my flux and my solder, and I touch the two together and it should whip right onto there for me. So you see the flux is burning off, and there we go. So that's nice and tinned. Actually took a lot of solder to do that, but that's okay. The more you do it, the farther up the solder will actually go underneath the coating and make a stiffer wire. So, do those three. Alright, so now we've got our tinned wires here. We'll go ahead and go to the Dean's connector. So when we're working with connectors like this, I always like to put a little bit of flux right on the pads when we're soldering. You need to even preheat that on there if you want. So we'll tin each one of these, and then we'll attach our wires. So get a little bit of your flux, and just dab it on to the point where you plan on soldering. And that'll work just fine. So you can see there, I just put a little bit of solder pad on there, then I can come back with my wires and finish it off. So, alright, once you've put your solder pads onto your Dean's connector, attaching the wires is going to be a little more difficult because everything acts as a heat sink. One thing is critical though, make sure you verify the polarity of your Dean's connector. There's really no markings on them, and as good as you may think you are, unless you've done this repetitive hundreds of times, it's a good possibility, 50% chance you could wire it backwards. So what I always like to do, I just got a simple pigtail that goes with my charger. It'll accept the Dean's connector. I'm just kind of put together just a little bit. You don't want to push it all the way together because then both Dean's connectors act as a heat sink, and can make it even more challenging. But now I can clearly see what side's positive and negative. That way I don't wire it backwards. So I'll go ahead and connect these. Now once you get a good connection, you can actually go in there and feed a little bit more solder in if you want to. Like I said, a higher wattage soldering iron would be nice. But we can't always have what we want. And that should work just fine. Whenever you get done soldering, give her a good tug. Make sure it's not coming off of there. The last thing you need is a loose solder joint. You need to apply some heat to the back side of here to kind of get that solder to wet down there just to make sure. That should be good. Just inspect it, make sure you've got good adhesion all the way around. You'll know when you do and you'll know when you don't. Alright. Alright, so that's positive and negative. So now we have our power connector down. Don't forget to put your heat shrink tube on. So just cut a couple of lengths of it. Because next we're going to put this onto our actually main board here. Alright, perfect. So alright, so on the main board, so how's this laid out? So if you look, you've got these pads here, next to your bolt holes where your legs are going to bolt on, are for your ESCs, and then this one over here is for your battery connector. One thing of note you'll see here is you see all this through-hole plating. Essentially, that's your two different copper masks on here. So right here in the center, they've got it's all painted over, but I can see a nice big copper pad. This is your positive pad, so you got all your positive is routed through this pad. There's nothing on this outside pad here. If you flip it over, you see all the negative here. On the back side, you have a similar pad here. That through-hole plating is just simply bringing that, transferring that connection over to the back side. So nothing to worry about there. There's multiple ones to give plenty of room for the power. Alright, so nothing playing around there. So again, a little bit of flux. Just put it there on the pads. That way you get really good cohesion. Not to worry about using too much other than it's really smoky and nasty. but it'll help you out in the long run. So, same procedure as before, load up the iron, and give yourself a nice little solder pad. I'm actually going to raise this up off my workpiece, or off my workbench here, just so we don't conduct so much heat down to the table. Voila. Now I've decided to actually run my wires coming straight out. If at a later date I don't feel that is how I want to, I can go ahead and reroute them. It shouldn't be too difficult. It's just a matter of redoing the solder. That one. Alrighty, so once they're on there, once again, mark clearly, don't want them backwards. Give them a good tug. Each one of those on there pretty good. No worries there. So each one of the ESC ones should be a little bit easier because the wire size will be a little bit smaller. So what we're going to do is go around and wire each one of the ESCs to this board. One thing I did want to mention, when you're soldering like this, make sure you try not to move the wires a whole lot as it cools. I always like to blow on a little bit, because if it moves while it's cooling, sometimes you can end up with a cold solder joint where it looks like it's soldered, but it, in all reality isn't, and over time it'll break loose. And you'll have all sorts of weird issues that will be difficult to diagnose. Alright, so when you're all said and done, you should have a nice little spider web of ESCs as such. So I got my main power connector on the positive there. The wires seem to be different lengths than what they ship me, but that's okay. But then I got each one of my ESCs, and just go through after you're done soldering, make sure you're on any cold solder joints, give them a tug, take a rag, wipe up a little bit of the flux. But as long as you had a nice hot iron and you use the flux, you really shouldn't have any issues with cold solder joints. So next video we'll go through actually mounting up the motors to the legs, and then the legs to this plate. And we'll start getting this quadcopter together. But really, once you get the soldering done, that should be some of the most difficult stuff. So, until next time.